Happy New Year, everyone. I hope you're doing wonderfully well. Daniel King here with a solo episode to answer one big question. I'm going to try to do this briefly. Are you going to be able to sell your outpatient therapy practice in 2026? So I view it as a soft buyer's market right now. There's a reasonable amount of mergers and acquisitions activity in our industry. Some people are buying businesses, some institutions are buying practices, but that activity is much more focused than it used to be. So in the aftermath of the pandemic in 21 and 22, there was just a mad feeding frenzy where every practice under the sun was being bought. That's not happening anymore. The buyers are still buying, but they're being much smarter because a lot of those institutions that invested at prices that were too high, they committed a ton of capital to assets that from a business perspective have underperformed. So many are licking their wounds, right? Because their bosses have said, you put out way too much money and the returns we generated just didn't make it worthwhile. So buyers are back out there again. They've had the chance to, in licking their wounds, learn some lessons, and they're looking for specific things. So I would say that if you want to sell your outpatient therapy practice in 26, there's going to be three big buckets. You want to put yourself into at least one of these, ideally more. Okay. If you wanted to really get a juicy offer, all three would certainly help. Bucket one is be big enough. Bucket two is offer something distinct. And bucket three is be in a state where a specific buyer is eager to expand. Let's start with bucket one, being big enough. What does that mean? I would say that a rough general baseline of $750,000 to $1 million of profit, okay, is going to be the minimum range where you can be pretty confident that you're going to find a buyer. This is very rough, but that's my general sense of where the market is. So if you hustle enough and you're within that range of profitability, especially after you pay yourself as owner a market salary, because some buyers are going to want to keep you in place, well, they buy a majority and you remain leading operations. Some will not. But if you're between $750,000 to $1 million of profit, either before or after you pay yourself a market salary, you're probably in the minimum category where a professional buyer, professional investor is going to be interested. Now, the offer you get may or may not meet your expectations, but I think there's a pretty decent chance that you get an offer if you're within that range. We can discuss how you should set your expectations another time. Second bucket, offer something distinct. What does that look like? I'm going to give you some examples. It could look like a non-standard payer contract where you built a special relationship with one specific payer in your state, and they're providing you a very generous reimbursement rate. Maybe it's a teaching program where in your state you're able to get insurance reimbursement or even self-pay for offering non-fully licensed clinicians. And in many states, there's a certain threshold above which you can't pay clinicians that are not yet fully licensed. So the margins end up being exceptionally good for a number of years. And of course, you can keep finding excellent students to teach, right? And build it into a cyclical program where every year you are working with exceptional, non-fully licensed clinicians. The margins tend to be very strong there. What about offering medication management to going beyond just therapy? EMDR is something I see a lot of practices do. That's not too distinct from an investor's perspective. I would say medication management or other higher margin services like ketamine, like psychological testing, these are distinct. And especially when combined with therapy, you're able to serve so many more patients. That really gets an investor's attention. There's going to be tons of other ideas out there. We're exposed to other ideas. If you haven't thought of any that really speak to you, could be a good idea to network with peers, especially in other states. We make introductions all the time to folks. So if you'd like to meet peers in other states, reach out to me. Learn about what they do. Determine whether you can import some of their cool ideas to your state. Okay, so that's another approach. The third bucket, be in a state where a specific buyer is eager to expand. Some buyers are very regional in their focus. They have a particular thesis that says, hey, they want to expand in this state, but not other states. And they will be way, way more interested in a smaller business than most investors would. So you may not be big enough to be in that 750 to a million range, but you're in a state where a specific buyer is very eager to expand. That could be interesting as well. As I said earlier, if you meet all three buckets, especially buckets 1 and 2, that can get investors super, super excited. So I would suggest meditating on those. Feel free to reach out to me if you're generally vibing with what I'm saying, but not quite sure how to go about doing it, and we can have a chat. Always open to speaking to folks long before they're actually ready to do a transaction so that they can understand the market more. And I love this industry. We here at Fireside are just excited to work with practice owners at whatever stage they're at. So if you resonate with what I'm saying, you're not quite ready to sell, you know you will be at a later date, and you want to start to think about how you can lay the groundwork to have a successful transaction when the time comes, drop me a line. Would love to have a conversation. Dan at firesidestrategic.com. We're going to put in the show notes my email so you can reach out to me. Hope that you have a wonderful day, a wonderful 2026 and beyond.